All right, well, hello everyone. Like Dr. Haas said, my name is Alyssa, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about John Milton. So, just by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of John Milton before? Okay, so a decent amount, but not quite as much as I would like, which is fair. And that's okay. My job today is to, at the very least, make you familiar with Milton and some of his legacy. So beyond this, it's my sincere hope that this will inspire you either to read more of Milton or any other writers who may appear confusing or intimidating to you, as Milton was to me. All right, so those of you who do know Milton are likely familiar with his epic poem, Paradise Lost, which is a retelling of the events leading up to and during the book of Genesis. So while this is certainly Milton's most well-known work, it is just one of the many contributions he has made to the body of pre- and post-Restoration English literature. John Milton was not only a successful poet, but also a political, religious, and historical writer. And at one point, he was even the Secretary for Foreign Tongues in England. He was then, and remains now, the subject of controversy. He was a staunch Protestant with very unorthodox beliefs, even within Protestant sects. And he did not shy away from voicing his opinions that were very kind of uncouth at the time, both politically and religiously. And these included denying the Holy Trinity, supporting divorce, and also the regicide of King Charles I. Milton also has been accused, and rightfully so, of being inconsistent in his philosophies regarding a number of issues, including religious toleration and the treatment of women. Despite this, Milton remains one of the greatest and most influential English writers of all time, and is often listed as only second to Shakespeare, and is widely regarded as the last great Renaissance poet. And a fun fact about Milton that a lot of you may or may not know is that he was completely blind when he dictated Paradise Lost, so other people had to write it for him. So that's one very cool thing about Milton. So, beyond that, the question probably on everyone here's minds is why I thought this was important enough to talk about, and why Milton. And that's even a question I'll get within the English circles, is why on earth would you want to study John Milton? He seems boring. And to some extent, I think, they're right to think that. But he is a very interesting author for sure. And my simple answer to this question is that Milton is confusing. And he's frustrating, and he doesn't always make sense. In fact, most of the time he doesn't make sense. And to many that may sound like a dead end for research. But as I hope many of you have come to learn over either your time here at Creighton or just engaging in intellectual discussions, questions come out of confusion, and out of questions come great research. So if you ever ask, you'll never know. And that's my philosophy with Milton. I first learned of Milton from seeing his name next to Paradise Lost on the AP reading list. And I didn't know much about it other than that it was biblical. And I picked up a copy from my local bookstore, and much to my dismay, I had the displeasure of feeling very stupid. And that, of course, wasn't for the first time, and certainly not the last. But it was a humbling experience nonetheless, and one that for some reason I felt inclined to repeat over and over and over again. I still continue to read Milton, obviously. But the reason for this is that Paradise Lost is one of those texts that's so dependent on allusion, metaphor, and a solid understanding of historical context that I could never really fathom fully understanding it. I still don't. I've come to realize that the things that kept bringing me back to Milton are actually very simple. The first is the beauty of Milton's writing. I, like many others before me, was and continue to be astounded by his knack for making the divine tangible, and his mastery over the English language. The second is that the very things that make Milton so confusing, his odd and often seemingly incompatible beliefs, make him not only a very interesting figure to study, but also a reflection of how we often compartmentalize our own beliefs in order to maintain our overarching philosophies in a way that may well seem short-sighted to our own ancestors. I believe the easiest place, of course, is to start with Milton's beauty. And so I'd like to share with you a notable passage from one of Milton's most memorable works, which is the poem Lycidas, which is a monody lamenting someone's death. This particular monody was written for Milton's school friend, Edward King, whose life and career in the church Milton bemoans the loss of. King was tragically killed in a shipwreck on his way to visit his family in Ireland. The poem is also a pastoral, and very skillfully blends and juxtaposes images of nature at its prime with that of decay and loss, creating a tension between the potential that King had as a clergyman with his untimely death and the current state of the church in Milton's eyes. Without even knowing any of this, it is clear that Milton is exceptionally gifted at his craft. Milton writes in the poem's fourth stanza, "But oh, the heavy change, now thou art gone, and must never return. Thee shepherd, thee woods and desert caves, with time and gadding vine overgrown, and all their echoes mourn. The willows and hazel copses green shall no more be seen, fanning their joyous leaves to thy soft lays, and killing as the canker to the rose, or taintworm to the weaning herds that graze, or frost to flowers that their gay wardrobe wear, when first white thorn blows, such Lycidas, thy loss to shepherd's ear." This poem continues to be taught in classes, read and reread for leisure, and the poem also persists through allusion and other works of literature. I actually recently found this poem referenced at the end of a novel entitled The Land of Spices by Kate O'Brien. The student in a convent is telling her fellow students how to interpret Lycidas, so it just goes to show how this poem continues to be referenced throughout other works. So, now that we have that covered, and we see the beauty of Milton, let's turn to some of the more tricky aspects of Milton's writing. So, perhaps the issue on which Milton's inconsistent thinking and in his opinions is most notable in his attitude towards religious freedom. Milton himself had very unorthodox religious beliefs, even within Protestant communities. And I'm actually going to really butcher this name. You'd think I'd know by now. Expresses in his Pactica, we'll say that, which is his defense of his belief in freedom of speech and also of the press. And he really, at the bottom of it all, really expresses a willingness to extend these freedoms to the practice and expression of his religious beliefs. And he writes that while some believe in the country or church divided into different sects will be adverse to the pursuit of higher truth or like the true religion, Milton disagrees, and he believes that the existence of these varying beliefs in different sects and religion allows for the exchanging and challenging of ideas, and ultimately only aids to the division, or aids to kind of combat this division in the church and to more closely ascertain the truth by this exchange of ideas. So, that's all fine and dandy, but not even 5 lines later, Milton explicitly identifies Roman Catholicism or popery as the one exception to this. He depicts its followers as being misled by an institution which itself is a detriment to all other religions. So obviously this is not religious toleration. So how does a seemingly very intelligent and thoughtful individual come to such a comically short-sighted conclusion, and why should we even care? So, as I've done research on this, Dr. Stephen M. Fallon offers an answer to this in his article entitled Reading Milton Today, Delight, Instruction, and Admonition. Fallon writes that Milton is particularly relevant today, not because he offers us a model to follow, but because of the tensions in his work prefigure real tensions confronting us today. On gender, he is both a masculinist and a proto-egalitarian. He is both an early voice for Republican government and an advocate for theocracy. Alternatives very much alive today, and sometimes found in the same figures. He argues for toleration, even as he views Catholic Irish as barbarians worthy of genocide. He comes from a different world, but one in which we can see the stirrings of our own, in its strengths, but also in its pathologies. What Fallon is really getting at here is that we as human beings, like Milton, are prone to inconsistencies when it comes to defending our own stances on divisive social issues. For instance, many people claim to be pro-life while opposing gun control legislation, despite the fact that these policies may have the potential to save human lives by preventing gun violence. This is to say that as humans, we tend to compartmentalize our stances on issues, rather than having an overarching philosophy that informs all of our beliefs. People do not want to be inconvenienced or have their sense of personal freedom squandered. Both we and Milton are guilty of this. Milton, a Protestant, specifically feared that the Church of England was becoming increasingly similar to the Catholic Church, which he believed to be oppressive. For this reason, Milton notes Roman Catholicism as his one exception to this belief, in his freedom of choice in the press, speech, and religion. In simple terms, Milton shows us just how easy it is for us to lose sight of our overarching values in the name of what benefits us. So, to wrap up our time here together, I would once again like to reiterate that beyond just appreciating literature for what it is and how beautiful it is, it's equally important that we read those works and authors that we find intimidating, like Milton, to learn more about the past, but also to learn more about ourselves. Thank you.